afternoon to all of you here in Australia, and good morning still for folks in India. Welcome again to all of you. Namaskar and greetings from Sydney to all of you. As we embark on this Australia-India Innovation Bridge series, we bring to you the second session of the series, where it's about bringing both the ecosystem together, some of the influencers, impact creators, EIRs from both these ecosystems to connect together, share the experiences, but also look at the future ahead as we bring both these ecosystems to actively collaborate together, look at these opportunities that's presented, and also get traction on outcomes as well that we are all working. And most of you, most of the panelists that we have, which is a great panelist we have, who are already actively involved in generating outcome between these two ecosystems. So it's a great opportunity for us all to connect. And thank you all for joining again on board now. To kick off the session, again, setting the context, as I did in the previous instance, there has never been a greater opportunity or time like that we have now. I know both the countries, Australia and India, at our own and the states, as well as at a federal national level, we are fighting the coronavirus situation. It's a situation which we are all cautiously, taking things on board, slowly evaluating what can be relaxed versus what we need to accelerate. But at the same time, it's also a good time. We've had about 3-4 months that the ecosystems have been impacted, where we want both the ecosystems to start looking at how do we catch up on the lost ground, how do we accelerate on the actual outcomes that we were hoping to achieve, and again build that traction closely with the collaboration. Now, as again I mentioned, we've just recently had last month a very high level engagement between both the prime ministers, both Australia and India, and have embarked on a great journey. There are some great outcomes, and there's a great story for startup from that as well, where there are various areas of collaboration, engagement across defense, science, innovation, technology, cybersecurity, circular economy, quite a lot of sectors that's come into limelight, that there's an active interest to make things happen. And recently, when I was talking to colleagues at Early Innovation Mission as well as Invest India, they're all keen to now deliver actions. I mean, we've spoken about this for a long time, and I see the great panelists that we have a great role to play, and again, your network as well, as we bring this together to deliver on those outcomes. So on that note, again, I want to welcome all the panelists, Andrew, Hayley, and James here from Sydney, and Mudit and Vijetha, and hopefully Tripti to join from India as well. Welcome on board again, guys, and thank you for taking this invitation of ours and coming on board. And I know you already have a lot of Australia-India story to share. So without much ado, I'll get on to the session with no particular order. I'll just randomly, pick some names here and get to hear from you. Now, I'll start off with Andrew, if that's okay. I mean, you've been an active part of the fintech ecosystem here globally, as well as from an Australian perspective. You've been an ambassador at Stone & Shock, which is one of the leading fintech accelerator globally. And of course, from Australia, curated some great successful stories. We've been talking about India. Obviously, the Indian fintech ecosystem has also been, quite active. And now we're looking at expanding that to RegTech, InsurTech, blockchain, and all those. So how do you see, first of all, the ecosystem has been impacted from COVID, and what are those pivoting, or what are those maneuvers that the startups have been doing as well, and how have they coped, and what is your perspective on how they are shaping forward, I suppose?
Yeah, thanks so much, Malik, for having me on the session today. It's a great initiative, so well done on that. It's interesting, I think, for startups in general and fintech in particular, there has been a significant impact from COVID. And that's been on several fronts. You know, it's been on the funding front. So there's quite a few startups that were either midstream with funding or about to launch some funding initiative. And they've had to revise that because the availability of funding is very different and arguably a lot tighter now. There've been impacts from a revenue perspective, so which touches into the area of customer adoption and usage. Although what I'd like to say though is actually what I'm seeing is almost like a tale of two dimensions here in the context of fintech. And one is that there are those organizations which are much more B2B centric, and the impact of COVID has been a lot less. In fact, in some instances, it's turned into a significant opportunity, versus others that operate in the B2C space where they are impacted perhaps by revenue, customer adoption, and so on. So I think that'd be an interesting point to work through the panel perhaps during the session. But other areas of impact also relate to staffing and talent. Of course, if a startup has been impacted at the revenue level, their ability to fund the size of their teams is, of course, impacted. So in some instances, they've had to trim back on staff or cut hours. But then probably the real big impact, which is often not talked about, I think, is at a mental health level. So we see a lot of founders who are having to take, this big responsibility on their shoulders in terms of their business, trying to protect the investments from their investors, trying to protect the job security of their staff, thinking about the proposition, the brand and everything. So I think founders actually are carrying a significant weight on their shoulders at that mental health level. In terms of ecosystem responses, so there's all sorts of great things that I've seen happening in the marketplace. And it's really things like, ecosystems like Stone & Chalk trying to digitize as much as possible the different offerings that they have to the ecosystem. So whether that's mentoring, webinars, putting information and guidance online, and even this sense of how do you build a strong community in a digital sense, because I think a lot of physical ecosystems have a good community where people come together physically and have a place where they work from. But then as soon as everyone's working from home, how do you translate that sense of community and that bond and that degree of cross-helping each other into a digital platform? So there's been a lot of focus and opportunity on that. And then also we see, of course, government stepping in to try and offer financial support in some instances to ecosystems. So in the case I know of Stone & Chalk, there's been a rent-free period that's been on offer as part of the Sydney Startup Hub. And of course, a lot of governments, not just in Australia, but elsewhere, have offered direct support of some shape or kind to startups and small business to help them, get through this tough time. So it's quite a broad and interesting mix of the challenges and of the response and opportunities. But, I think everyone's still on a steep learning curve during this time.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. And I can see a lot of traction. I've seen some of the startups are back in the ecosystem, a cautious approach, but yeah, there are certain pivoting I've seen, and some of them are actively involved and looking at, offshore opportunities as well as, bridging into other markets. So we'll come and revisit that topic, while I'll switch over to India, folks. Mudit, if I can, Mudit, invite you to share your thoughts around how the startup ecosystem there are really shaping. Obviously, they've been impacted, but I've seen a lot of traction, and Govt support has been phenomenal, I must acknowledge. So let's hear from you what the perspective is there from an Indian ecosystem and what they're looking forward to.
Sure. Good morning and good afternoon to friends in Australia. It's great to be on this panel, following up on the conversation between our Prime Ministers, also on a similar platform. I think this is the time for us to deepen these connections, to make new connections and deepen existing ones. Talking about startups in the post-COVID era, I think the impact or the change or the impact, the magnitude of change has been so big that some people have called it that we should move away from BC and AD to BC and AC, which is before Corona and after Corona. We are in a new era, we are in a new epoch, and which has some fairly dramatic changes. If I talk about the bigger changes, conferences like these, panels like these would not have been very common. I think all of us have suddenly become more open to doing these things online rather than traveling, going through airports, all those things. So I believe national boundaries will have a smaller impact on when it comes to knowledge sharing, information sharing, and maybe a bigger impact when it comes to product exports, imports. And that to me is a huge opportunity for startups, especially in things like SaaS, software as a service, or B2B applications, where increasingly national boundaries or national markets will still be important, but not be as much of a hindrance as they were. And maybe that will also help startups to start thinking about what they are offering and how their broader markets can be. And this is maybe a little more relevant to Indian startups because they tend to think of our own country as a bigger market, but maybe for other countries as well. The other part that we've seen a lot in the last few weeks is a very healthy trend, in my opinion, on moving towards deep tech, science-based entrepreneurship, or what deep innovation. Different countries are using different phrases. But what I'm basically saying, bringing things from the lab to the field. Our Prime Minister has been talking about it in several of his speeches. Somebody mentioned recently that he mentioned this phrase 5 times in the last year of 2019. And I think that momentum has started to come into the startup world only now, when you realize that there's only so much that e-commerce or marketplaces can offer. And when it comes to hard problems like pandemics or climate change, you actually need hard physical solutions, which bring new science, new technologies to the market. And that mindset change is what I'm seeing in startups of late, not just in startups, but in the venture fund also. If you see the last 2 cohorts of some of the largest accelerators like Sequoia and all, a huge shift towards bringing science-based on companies to the market. And the final point that I'd like to share, which I've been seeing and also pushed by the Indian government, but generally the movement was to challenge monopolies. And with network effects, last 20 odd years, we are all used to being on common platforms or common systems. And a fast digitization, of course, would have meant that the digitization would enforce those network effects. But I'm seeing that there is increasingly interest to challenge monopolies, whether it be e-commerce, whether it be video conference platforms, whether it be even peer-to-peer sharing. If you've been seeing the recent trends in the crowdfunding world, an immense amount of new efforts. If you look at it one way, it's just fragmentation, or if you look at it another way, it's deepening of the market, so that there's not a single, there's not an over dependence on 1 or 2 platforms. And that challenging of the monopolies, I think, got accelerated due to various geopolitical reasons, of course, but also because people saw that there's a lot more value in digital world, and that customers are now asking for more specialized offerings, more specialized services. And to me, those are some of the major changes. So 2 or 3 things that I talked about, deep science to entrepreneurship, health, climate change, a lot more focus on challenging monopolies, and wider markets. So dissolving national boundaries and broadening and deepening markets. So that would be what I'm seeing and what I would love to see go further. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'll come back to you about the whole Atma Nirbhar Bharat, the self-reliant India. Obviously, that's obviously, again, we see as a game changer. We've seen what's been happening in the market as well. But definitely, I still believe that that's still an opportunity for countries very closely aligned to work together. So I'll come back to that in a tick. I'll probably use the same tempo and get some energy from Vijetha, who's been championing from Bangalore with the ecosystem, have facilitated some phenomenal webinars so far as well, and actively been part of our fabric to curate India-Australia bridge activities, and also help startup scale-ups to be launched in Australia and vice versa. So Vijetha, on that note, I'll invite you to share your experiences of how companies startups have fared, and what are the new opportunities or new ways that they have adopted to.
Sure, Irfan. Thank you so much, everyone. And Mudit, that was a very concise and beautifully put situation rep report. Okay. So Irfan, if you remember, a few months back, we actually met in Bangalore.
Yep.
At the Australia, Deputy Commissioner was there, and we were discussing the same things, right? What will happen? What will be the future? So few things I would just illustrate it very point by point. Number one, that Kmart Australia, Irfan, is now active in India. They're actually sourcing for innovation around retail tech. And, it's very critical because retail, though we have had these challenges of the lockdown, I think Australia is in a much better situation, and they're looking for innovations around retail tech from India, number one. Then carrying on from what Andrew said and what Mudit also said, the governments are now understood that innovation is very critical. So every day there are some new innovations coming out, but it's not just innovation that is staying in the lab or it's staying at someone's house or someone's mind. It's actually being deployed. And I talk to about 20 to 50 founders every day, Irfan. And
Yeah.
what they're doing is they're focusing on getting to the, out into the street. They're focusing on getting customers. And I think this is music to the ears for everyone out here, right? Andrew and James and Mudit and Hayley and even you, Irfan, because the innovation speed is so dramatic that we're going to see a lot of good things coming out from there. And the global part of it, video conferencing. Okay, so we've all heard about Zoom, we've heard about GeoMeet, we've heard about Google Hangouts, we've heard about all these guys. Man, there are about another 5 or 6 of these video conferencing and camps. Someone who can scan things at a super duper speed that is coming out because of the challenge we're facing with COVID. And I will maybe share it out later with you, Irfan, and you must share it with everyone else. There are some innovations around, okay, how can we detect the virus faster? They've created face washes that can kill the virus. They've detected, ultraviolet ray machines that can, kill the virus from your mobiles, from your wallet, from your keys. So there are a lot of fantastic innovations that are happening all over the world. And thanks to this video conferencing, product development, iterations, and which couldn't have happened without a scrum meetings, couldn't have never happened without 20 people standing face to face and working together. Hey, guess what, man? It's all happening online. They figured it out. Okay, these guys are amazing. And yes, can we do this alone? We cannot. Okay, I mean, it's not just about TIE or NASCOM or Head Start or the Startup India program or Startup Karnataka or the governments and what all of you wonderful people from Australia are doing. What really matters, Irfan, and what we can really power this is coming together and figuring out what are the global solutions. And this is a shout out to all you wonderful folks also. See, we have had people, for example, from Goldman Sachs, from Cartier. So they are saying that these are some schemes available for globally. I mean, yes, very clearly, it is not about India centric. You have to compete with the rest of the world very clearly. Okay, but there are so many opportunities where where people can actually apply. And I love what Mudit said. Right, it's a science of it. Science, technology, innovation. That's really coming into the forefront. I am absolutely clueless. I don't know a single line of coding, but I can understand the go-to-market and I can understand how we can take all these things together, the bits and pieces, and bring people together. It's about the bridge, right, Irfan and folks? So let's do something awesome with this. And looking forward to take things beyond just this webinar. Okay, otherwise we'll be short dead. They'll all say that you're just doing webinars. Do more about it.
Yeah, true. I think that's very much so. And again, if we need to, one of the things that I want to get out of this as well, probably as we delve into the session, we will go specific on some outcomes as well. And I would love to share some success stories as well between us. Thank you, Vijetha, and thank you for being a front runner in really facilitating and supporting the morale of the startups as well during these tough times there in the ecosystem. So great to have you on board. I'll switch to Hayley here in Australia. Now, you obviously being an entrepreneur in residence with one of the leading universities and their incubation accelerator program, but also leading women entrepreneur yourself, and also leading the charge in the medtech space with your own startup. What has been your journey in the last 3 to 6 months with the startup that you've dealt with, and what are those opportunities that you see that we will experience in the near future as we support these scale-ups to go global?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me along as well. I think I can wear a couple of hats here, speaking from a founder and innovator, moving on to innovating in our second company in medtech now, right through to wearing my entrepreneur in residence hat, as you mentioned. I think firstly what we're seeing from the university level is this incredible flood of applications literally coming through, particularly in the med tech space where I operate, with these ideas that are coming to us from professors within the university or other students looking for help to really bring their idea to life. And so the university I particularly work with, we already bridge in with India, and we take a trip there every year to connect our innovators in with the ecosystem there. So that was one of my first openings and exposures to India, which I've then carried through to my own company as a medtech founder. To really understand the value, I guess, of our two ecosystems has been incredible. I've always, the last 12 months, it's been so many conversations around let's do more in the Asia Pacific. And so there's this opportunity right now, I think, to understand what's happening in India and what's happening in Australia and join, because I really believe between our two ecosystems, it's the ultimate ecosystem. Australia holds a smaller test market, if you like. We're able to very much design well and strongly here and with confidence. And then we're able to collaborate with India, which opens up this huge test market with big variety of different industries in it for us to test our products in and even launch and become an incredible scaled company. So I can go deep into that conversation, but I think at a higher level, there's just so much offering between the two countries when we join together through actions, which we'll see after this call as well, I'm sure. We can really see companies scale.
Great. Hayley, thanks for being part of the journey. I know you got certain medtech opportunities that we are actively involved in. That's some of the success stories we want to talk about. Let me switch over to James. You've been an amazing, and I think you've been again wearing multiple hats. As an investor, as a founder, and in fact, a power networker, and also actively being involved in the Australian Innovation Bridge and with some of the startups as well. So yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on how have your startups in your network shaped what you are looking to and how you're looking to support them as well.
Sure. Well, thank you, Malik, for the invitation, and I consider it a great privilege to be on a panel with such an illustrious group. Thank you, everyone who's dialed in. I think it's a very exciting moment. You can sense the energy from both sides, from Australian and Indian-based entrepreneurs and people active in the ecosystem, with very good reason. The two markets are highly complementary, and to give an illustration of perhaps some of that work, in fact, Malik has been instrumental in helping me understand how to move some of the startups that I'm working with, how to take their growth plans from expansion to India and internationally, from being a distant dream that we would get to at some point if everything was successful here in Australia, to suddenly the plan to go to India is front and center. It is absolutely where the market potential sits for some of these startups. And I think that sense that it is highly possible for technology startups to bring their markets, their goods to market in India has really landed with the ecosystem here. And I think people are genuinely excited about that potential. And in addition, the sheer level of energy, dynamism, the intelligence of the people that you're dealing with make possibilities very apparent to people here. And I think there's a real appetite on both sides for the two ecosystems to mesh together and to trade with one another on a very equal footing. And I think there's a lot to be gained by all parties. And I just say thank you to Malik and to InQ, because in one case in particular, we really had a very different business plan for the medtech device that I was helping to commercialize. And now we are actually targeting India specifically and as the first market to launch in, because it fits so well to the dynamics of that market. That's not something that we would have had a lens on until we started conversations. So big thank you there as well.
Thanks, James, for those words. And I think just putting the perspective, I mean, why is it important for Australian startups to look at India as a market? And why is it important for Indian startup ecosystems to look at Australia as a launch market? And we've delved on this, and I want to just reinforce my own experience, and then again, I want to come back to all the panelists. Now, I believe that from a market perspective, Australia presents a great market for any Indian startup which are looking to scale into a global market before they go to Europe or even to the US to really, validate in terms of market validation, investor validation, customer validation, but also with the legal framework, the structural framework that this market provides. I think it's a great launch pad before scaling. So I think it's a no-brainer, and with the whole ecosystem that's here, a mature ecosystem that this market presents, it's a no-brainer for Indian startup ecosystem to look at. And then specifically on those opportunities where India and Australia actively are collaborating, whether it's defense tech, agri-tech, med-tech, cybersecurity, blockchain, fintech, certain parts of reg-tech, and those areas, and social impact, social enterprise space as well, name a few, where there's a lot of heightened activity, demand both sides, where I think there's a strong role for Indian ecosystem to look at Australia to see. There's another recent conversation which happened around the circular economy, clean energy, sustainability space as well. There's increased demand in India, where I think working with Australian ecosystem makes sense, and vice versa for Australian ecosystem to get access to Indian market, the scale of opportunity that it provides, the very aligned culture as well, the startup culture, traditionally we've collaborated on the technology collaboration space quite a bit. Now at the startup level, I think there's a very good alignment there, and it becomes a natural partner for us as a startup ecosystem to look at India to not only launch but also grow along with the ecosystem. So I think that's a great space to be in, and I think we've seen some outcomes happen of late. But I think we need to just we need this on for the lack of the word. We need to have that on steroids. We need to boost this exchange and outcomes as well. And I know the likes of Atal Innovation Mission and our partners in India, T-Hub, Kerala Startup Mission, NASCOM, TIE, all of them have really supported this initiatives. But I think to dwell on further, what are those tangible outcomes post-COVID that we can look at where we can catch up on the lost ground, but also how can we achieve some of those tangible outcomes for both these ecosystems to collaborate closely? So Mudit, I'll start with you this time. What do you think? Obviously, you are now taking up a new role as well, really spearheading that closer engagement with the PMO and the principal scientific advisor as well. What do you see? How will we create some more this traction going forward and tangible outcomes?
Thanks. So actually, you had a very good idea on of Indian entrepreneurs thinking of Australia as, in a sense, a test market before you go into the big bad world of America. But that's an interesting idea which I hadn't thought of. That could be one way of doing it. But increasingly, what we've seen from other countries working with other countries is that to really get young entrepreneurs interested, you have to give them some tangible problem to solve. And the challenge method has really worked on that, which is joint challenges for, things that Australia does very well, things like dairy or things like circular economy could be ideas, or things that India has taken the lead, whether it be IT products, whether it be increasingly biotech products. So that offers not just entrepreneurs, but even late stage engineers and technologists who are thinking of entering this world, the right incentive, the right pull to get into or think of commercializing their research. And to me, that is one very simple, tangible thing which works with, and it's at the cusp of the technical world and the entrepreneurship world, and it connects those two worlds very well. So to me, that is one good idea. And then vice versa, as you mentioned, Kerala Startup Mission, T-Hub. T-Hub specifically has been doing a very good job of providing a landing ground for international entrepreneurs. And Hyderabad is a very welcoming place, a very open market to start off with. And that kind of a simple address or a simple place that if somebody in Australia thinks that his or her product could be usable in a developing setup, here's the person's contact in T-Hub, go and start off there. And having that simple connection probably provides a lot more reassurance. I just think of myself when I went abroad as a graduate student, when I went to Australia, for the first time, just having that one phone number of somebody who you could call and reach out to gives a lot of assurance, especially if you're trying to set up a business, right? And that kind of a thing could be really pivotal. So those kinds of linkages, and I'm not pointing out only T-Hub, there are other people doing some very interesting work as well. But those kinds of linkages actually provide assurance. And if we can share those 3, 4 contacts, 5 contacts with the major incubators in Australia and vice versa, that could be really a very simple tool to get something on the ground, get an action going on the ground.
Yeah, okay. I think you touched on the challenges, and speaking of which, I will come back to you about a challenge, a virtual hackathon session we are looking to launch next month, and also there's certain initiatives between the Govt as well that we're looking to launch later this year. So that's a great way. But also these market access programs that we kind of initiated, how do we really get outcomes, tangible, where we filter some of these companies who will create an impact, and how do we fast track them, match them with the right partners, either in India or vice versa, but also look at any support. Because one thing we touched, and Vijetha also touched, and something we are seeing a lot more, is not about launching an investor. It also is to create a market traction, business development, or revenue growth. So that's something which it'll be good to see how that pans out between the ecosystem, and love to hear from other panelists as well. But just before I'll leave you there, Mudit, just if you can touch on the Atmanirbhar Bharat, and how does that present opportunity for Australian startups to look at?
Yeah. So let me actually start by translating the 3 words, Atmanirbhar Bharat. You'll be hearing this phrase very often. It actually just directly translates to self-reliant India. And if you know of Indian history, there is a fear that this might be interpreted as a closed-off system or a closing of the markets, but that's not at all the case. Atmanirbhar Bharat is a recent phrase, but also we've had several millennia of history of using the phrase Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is the entire world is my family. And those 2 things are not mutually contradictory. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam says we treat everybody the same way as we would like to be treated, the golden rule. But as a country, as a nation, we realized in this crisis and in the last few months that for your basics, and the basics in modern life are a lot more than what we think of just as food, shelter, and water. But the basics of digital communication, your platforms, all these things are required to be in the system so that you're not dependent or reliant on anybody else. And strategic autonomy has been the motive of Indian foreign policy and geostrategic policy for decades. And strategic autonomy traditionally was only thought of in terms of military power, but increasingly digital power is just as much a part of national security as military power or your diplomacy. So the Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliant India, is a rallying call. It's a clarion call for innovators, for entrepreneurs, for business leaders to create products and services which not just cater to the world, but also make sure that we are self-independent. We have a long history of going from a food importing nation in the early 60s to be a food exporter by the late 60s, early 70s. And the Green Revolution spurred on that movement of self-reliant India. I say that Green Revolution saved the world's largest democracy, and it was a technological change in the dwarf seeds. So I see this as a similar call where you're not closing yourself off, but you're saying we will be sufficient of our own. We will have enough to share. We will have enough to export, and we'll treat everybody equally, but we'll make sure that we are not reliant on anybody. And so that's the bigger picture. But if I quickly focus that on what has that meant for the digital or the technology ecosystem, just 2 days ago, the Prime Minister launched, with Atal Innovation Mission's help, the Atmanirbhar App Challenge. Now, this is not about recreating existing platforms, but thinking about how you take the benefits of digital technology into the 1.5 billion people that we are. And way too often, the innovation comes from people who've been educated in the private schools, abroad, and all those things. But how do we get them to start thinking about innovations? And I'm very happy to report that just recently there was another challenge on creating an Indian video system, actually, after Zoom's problems. And you will be amazed at where innovations came from. Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. Cities that I would have never thought of as having startup companies, and 2 of those 5 companies, of the 5 shortlisted companies, are from Jaipur and Alapura. And I'm sure these are not the cities that come to mind when you think of innovation. So that is the focus of getting the benefits of the recent technological revolution into the hands of everybody. India survived and thrived in this crisis using digital benefits transfer. So those are the kinds of things that can come together and also be useful for other countries. I believe our UPI interface, where people from Bangalore actually stood up and delivered a platform, is now a model for several countries. So those are the kinds of things that we are saying we will innovate not just for India, but for other countries. And that's what the offering for the Australian entrepreneurs can also be, that you come to India, perfect your market. You can think of us as one market or 29 big markets. And then that will give you the kickstart for maybe all of Southeast Asia, Africa, most of Middle East. And that's a great foothold to have. So that would be the pitch that I would encourage the Australian entrepreneurs to think about.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue. I mean, it's essentially collaborate with India, but scale and leverage that to scale globally, and where we can build global solutions as well. So as a great landing pad as well, I'm hopeful our associates and partners at Austrade as well definitely will be looking towards setting up the soft landing or landing pads in India. I know that's been discussed around, but I'm looking forward to achieving that actively because there's more and more closer ties happening. Now, on that note, Vijetha, I'll pull you back in as someone who's very oriented around outcomes and actions. What are other things that you've been dealing with multiple countries. I know from Europe to Canada, US, and quite a lot of countries you've been actively involved. Singapore as well for establishing that bridge. For Australia, what are those key things that you would see that would deliver actionable outcomes for the startup ecosystem there, and also for ecosystem here?
Definitely, Irfan. So one is 100%, though people talk about webinar fatigue, this kind of webinars, even if it is 20, 30, 40 people coming together and sharing information and getting to know each other, is definitely a very important building block. Okay, I mean, let us be very, very clear that this respect, whatever everyone else says, these are very good building blocks. And people to people contact, Irfan, because we should be very clear, like people like me and Mudit are enablers, we are catalysts. But ultimately, we need to bring the real folks together. Now, who are these real folks together, right? I think it's very important. And let's be also very clear, Irfan. Australia, you all will have to take care of your economy, your people, your innovators. India, we have bigger challenges than Australia right now. I mean, you know everything, right? I mean, what are the problems that we're facing? But having said that, we just focus and make up how can we create JVs? Like we have to create this, and something that we should all come together, make an understanding of what are the law of the lands of each of the two countries. I'm being very specific, right? Number one. Number two, people like you, Stone and Chalk, and all the other wonderful folks who are creating, this innovation in your countries. They talk to us about, through your corporates, about use cases. Okay, share with us that these are the challenges, these are the use cases, these are the potential paid POC global. Obviously, you will definitely give priority to your own country. You will give priority to your own people because everyone needs this business. But maybe some JVs can be worked out, saying that these are the folks, these are the lawyers, these are the CAs, these are the co-working spaces, or these are the accelerators who are looking to work with Indian companies, Indian innovators. And I like what Mudit also is saying, right? This is not just about startups or innovators or whatever anymore, Irfan. There are a lot of people from academia. There are a lot of fantastic people who are coming out from corporates who have got the, they have the ability, the skill sets, they can really drive innovation, they can create rapid prototyping. So these are the kind of people that I would love to expose to, through you and through all the people out here. What has been working, for example, UK, it's working because they have created something around AI innovation challenges, right? Number one. Number two, what Netherlands is doing is very focused. They're bringing in people from agriculture and healthcare, just two things. They're not trying to crack, 20, 30, 40, 50 sectors, whatever. They're focusing agriculture, health tech, and doing a lot of deep dives. They've got academia, they've got universities, they've got accelerators, they've got some investors. All of them, we're working together to create more and more of people contact, because the more exchange of ideas happen, the better it is. I mean, we have Mudit here. They have got such fantastic deep inroads across the Indian innovation ecosystem. Let's try to create more and more of these people-to-people, innovator-to-innovator contacts. And yes, we have to bring investing, not just in terms of funding or whatever, but maybe bring in grants, bring in some government. Academia is very, very critical, and I think the kind of work that I know that InQ is doing with Acharya Institute, for example, here in India. Can we replicate, duplicate, and figure out the best ways possible? So these are the 4 or 5 things that will work out, Irfan. I also know that there's a lot of work happening through T-Hub and Kerala, because you're from Kerala, so KSUM is definitely there. And there are other people also. Okay, there are other governments, and no, I mean, I would love to help all you.
I think
do something.
Great, thanks, Vijetha. And taking a cue from what you mentioned, part of the series, the next one on the cards is the Investor Ecosystem Connect, because that's definitely a strength and pillar for supporting these ecosystems. So we've got a investor series coming up, and then we also have a founder to founder connect as well. So definitely we've taken that cue or preempted that. We'll have that. And then also we've got a series of emerging tech webinar connects as well. So that's something which please do stay tuned. And again, it's not only about this webinar, but also taking beyond this webinar and establishing those connects to deliver outcome. Now, just on that note, I would just want to give a quick plug-in for a virtual hackathon that I mentioned about. I'll just share that quickly. So yeah, just you can see on the screen, we have a virtual hackathon, again, facilitated by InQ Hub. We'll also be working with other ecosystem partners as well. We're looking to have that on the 6th and 7th of August. So the launch and the submission is all happening as we speak. We picked certain problem statements and opportunities being based on the experience during the COVID across healthcare, services, supplies, med tech challenges we've had, supply chain improvements, a lot of bottlenecks we have experienced. How do we improve those? Global payments, fast tracking payments, and reg tech as well, where a lot of fraudulent transactions happen. How do we preempt and prevent some of these things? And global communication, education requirements as well to keep it floating. We're looking at that aspect, and also global cybersecurity, which has gone through the roof, the needs because of the digital exchange. So please stay tuned and just definitely check out for this Australia-India Rehack hackathon that we'll be launching, and I look forward to very active participation, and we'll obviously be sharing a lot more as we go. So just wanted to give you that plug-in. Now, on that note, let me again loop back with Andrew in terms of some of the fintech startups we touched on, and more so in the reg tech space. In fact, I was talking to some folks at Australia this morning as well, that we are seeing a lot growth in the reg tech space as well, and I believe Australia has a lot to offer there for India. What is your thoughts on what are those few targeted areas, or even if you want to quote any of the startups as well, which you believe will be great for India or help them scale? You also, I want to recognize that Andrew is quite actively working in other regions, in the African region as well, for financial inclusion, but also accessibility to financial services and innovation. So I see again India as a great launch pad before scaling that to the MENA region or Greater Africa region as well. So maybe you can shed some insights on that aspect as well, Andrew. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So I think there's at least 2 dimensions of opportunity I'd like to raise. The first is very much around how do we build joint communities together. The great thing is with Zoom and all these digital technologies, we're no longer constrained by national boundaries, by the tyrannies of physical distance. So, if we want to connect mentors with founders, if we want founders to support each other, if we want to build these communities, why can't we start to do this on a cross-border basis? There should be nothing holding us back with that regard. And, so I think here's a fantastic opportunity to start to mesh the two ecosystems together. The other area that I like to raise is, I think, at a government level, you know, in Australia, in the context of fintech anyway, the government has really instigated a lot of change to support a vibrant, flourishing fintech ecosystem over the last few years. You know, just this month, we've seen the open banking model go live, where now the big banks have been forced to make available customer data upon request, that then they can share that with other parties to perhaps source better and cheaper products. We have many neobanks coming to market in Australia, primarily driven on the back of a loosening of the regulatory obligations. I think also at a government to government level, there's a lot of opportunity for governments to learn from each other and to cross collaborate and to try out things that have been successful in other markets. And definitely, you know, just to touch on your point about my work in Africa, there's definitely a lot of collaboration happening across Africa. You know, Africa at the end of the day is more than 50 individual countries, but there's so, you know, many pockets of fantastic innovation and collaboration happening, East Africa, West Africa, and so on. And I think, you know, whilst most people see Africa as being perhaps behind the rest of the world, you know, there's a lot the world can learn from Africa in terms of the adoption of mobile services and what it means when you've got a young, vibrant population who really have a lot of excitement and energy and a real, you know, entrepreneurial streak in thinking about their future and about, you know, how do they make life successful for them. So I think, you know, these are the real opportunities here. How can we, like I said, move away from the traditional thinking, move away from the barriers that we've had in the past, and really get people, you know, like-minded people in terms of opportunity, skills, and capability to work together on a much more collaborative and integrated basis.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And I think that's again a great opportunity for Australian startup ecosystem to look at the African opportunity. But before launching into Africa, I think to build the scale, validate that in a market like India, find the right partners, execution partners, and then launch into Africa, the rest of MENA region, and Europe, I suppose. So that's, I think, is a great opportunity, and definitely, Andrew, will look forward to working with you as well on some specific opportunities. I know you looked at some of the Australian startups in the fintech, regtech space that we can leverage into India. So look forward to working closely. I also want to touch on certain opportunities, which is, again, I'm giving a call out, shout out to not only Govt partners, both sides, but also investor partners, ecosystem partners, to look out for, and I think maybe Vijetha or Mudit, you would have touched on, look out for opportunities where there is a co-investment opportunity, where whether it's as part of a matched grant or as part of a certain a cohort co-investment opportunity where both ecosystem can then be part of it. There is also a great model of fund of funds as well, which we have seen a lot in India, which we're keen to be part actively in that, where it's again joining forces to really strengthen the outcome and delivering a greater impact. So something which we'll be actively working with various funds as well to facilitate that, as even we look to launch our second iteration of InQ Fund. So that's something which, definitely I wanted to share. Now, Hayley, just a quick plug-in. Let's focus on your startup, medtech startup. Obviously, it's great that you have, again, that's probably one of the stories as well. We've looked at from James's perspective, which I'll come in a tick. But Hayley, you obviously pivoted in your iteration of this new product, and you got a new startup really focused on markets like India, and you're actively looking for partners. What is your call out to potential partners who are listening as well? And how do you see that emerging out there?
Yeah, absolutely. India is actually our first intended market to go into. So we find that incredibly exciting, and we know we can help a lot of people there in the health tech area. We're looking to offer a zero cost rehabilitation system after you get a new knee. And we know that the numbers are really high in India. So we're currently looking for investors to partner with us in India. Our manufacturing will be done over there, and our entire first market emergence as well. So I think it'd be incredibly valuable to have someone on the ground, and that's why in our first emerging market, so India-based, as we said, investors and manufacturers is the ideal matchup. Yeah, and an incredibly exciting market, and I'm really equally excited to actually steer away from the emerging in the US and other markets where we've gone with products in the past. I think this is certainly the way forward.
Yeah, definitely. I want to give a few plug-in from Australia-India Business Council, where I head as the national chair for startup and innovation, and we've also got a focus and aligned to this self-reliant in India. How do we collaborate and make it India? So a lot of startups here in Australia who definitely believe in the product and product scaling with some great design and user experience, but having the right partner in India to do the product, engineering, as well as commercialization of manufacturing, and then produce it for the world. I think there's a lot of that I'm hearing as well. In fact, another plugin for one of our partners, Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center, who received a lot of interest as well, who are working actively closely with us to see how can we bridge and leverage with the Indian market to support the traction that Australian ecosystem is looking for. So definitely all the manufacturing, product engineering, healthcare, tech, electronics, partners, and of course investors who are looking at scaling, we would definitely look out to reach out to you all, and where this network of people-to-people connection can facilitate. But again, delivering the outcome will be definitely a collaborative exercise. So looking forward to that, Hayley, and yeah, wish you all the best there. James, over to you again. I know.
Malik, I'm afraid you've gone on mute. Sorry. James,
again, yeah, thank you again. And I want to recognize the work you are doing actively to be a key influencer, to talk about India. In fact, people who have not even thought about India, you're saying, well, think about India and how you can collaborate, not only leveraging the market, but also collaboration from JVs or product development and engineering and those spaces as well. And of course, yeah, the market to scale is there. So what is your personal thought on how, India is going to present for your own network and your startups that you're championing as well?
Sure. So to share a couple of perspectives, as I mentioned, the medical device that we're working on commercializing, and Malik is heavily involved in assisting me with that. The first go-to-market plan that we had was really Australia-focused, because we're in Australia, we're Australians, and so we started with the market we knew. And in that environment, structurally, it's relatively more saturated. There are rival offerings, there's substitute products, etc. And when we started discussing the Indian opportunity, it very quickly fell into place that there was a much higher drive, much less established field in that place. And it was really a case of then the technology became not just a substitute for something that existed, but really let India leapfrog ahead of the provision of services that we have in India. And there is a very good chance that that commercialization pathway will eventually end up with the device being then resold back to India and often to the States and so on as well. So that was really my first angle with that. In my work here with the Antler Accelerator and with some of the startups coming out of that and some of the other accelerator programs, really India hadn't entered into conversation. There's a very common sort of pathway that people discuss and they're aware of about the Silicon Valley pathway and off to the States, often to the UK and Europe, for instance, especially if people have personal backgrounds or family links to those. But India really hadn't featured in the planning, I think, until fairly recently. And now, as people are starting to see the possibilities, they're starting to understand and learn from one another, the role models, how you go about things, who you call, having friends that have some shared experience and can offer tips and advice, enormously helpful. And so now, really and truly, it goes to probably the top of our list for markets. As soon as the companies, for instance, Upstreet.co that Malik and I are working with, and they have enormous market potential, and they really thrive on large numbers of consumers on the platform. And in Australia, the population size gives us a certain addressable market, whereas in India, it is vastly bigger, and we can have much greater social impact on the consumer's well-being. So really very exciting. And those conversations, I would suggest, are fairly recent and fairly new. And the attention that the politicians have been giving this has filtered into conversations. The fact that links are starting to form, as you've mentioned, between academia, venture capital, incubators, accelerators, co-working spaces, it's happening at all levels. And I think it's to be very much encouraged, and things will only go from strength to strength, I suspect.
Great, thanks, James, for that. Just cognizant of time, I'll just see if there are any questions from the audience. Otherwise, I'll just do a quick check-in from all of you. I just want to also touch on the fact that there are a lot of programs that is being planned under the Australia-India Innovation Bridge by the ecosystem. So it's an open innovation bridge, so it's not restricted to any groups or any groups of organizations. It's an open innovation bridge that we have facilitated. I know the government is also going to be formally facilitating a lot of idea challenges as part of this bridge, whether it's Startup India, Australia, DFAT here, or Department of Innovation, Industry and Sciences here, DST, Department of Science and Technology there, and Ministry of External Affairs and Atal Innovation, all of them working in tandem. So there'll be a lot of action there. So please do tag and reach out to this Australia-India Innovation Bridge journey, and we'll be happy to facilitate any of these, connects that's required for, the right fit for purpose matched organization or people. But also, please look out for the Australia-India Business Council, initiatives as well from Australia, but also as we reach out to the partners there, CII, FICCI, NASCOM, or Indo-Australia Chamber of Commerce as well. All of them will be actively working with the industry bodies as well. Now, just quickly to check in, definitely, Thai Bangalore and Thai has been phenomenal. I want to recognize Thai's role, and in fact, Vijetha driving that as well. Something which I want to recognize, that we want to give very tangible outcomes. So even if it takes a while for Austrade to get up the landing pads, we want to facilitate, these either virtual landing pads or even essentially some kind of soft landing pads when a situation on the ground becomes better, where these ecosystem partners can actually facilitate. I'm sure we'll be happy to host startups in India, in Bangalore, Hyderabad, or Kerala, or Orissa, or Delhi, or anywhere else in Mumbai as well, depending on the alignment. Similarly, we'll be happy to host with our partners at the Sydney Startup Hub or any other ecosystem, startups to be co-located and leverage the power of the people networks that we can bring together. So yeah, looking forward to definitely working with you. Quick check-in of 2 or 3 key things, even a word that you can mention are critical for this Australia-India Innovation Bridge to for us to take it forward to be successful. Vijetha, I'll start with you. You are the most one of the creative people, so I'll start with you. Quick 2 or 3 words which are important for the success of Australia-India Innovation Bridge.
So I think it's just a cheers to all of us, mate. That's it. That's what I want to say. Let's innovate together. That's what matters.
Thank you, Andrew.
Let's innovate together.
Thank you, Andrew. Any few words that really resonate, stand out for our Australia-India Innovation Bridge to be successful?
Yeah, I think it's just creating the opportunities for everyone to connect together to share their thoughts and ideas.
Okay, thank you. Hayley, over to you. Any 3 words or things that you want to share quickly as important for success of the bridge?
Yeah, collaboration is king. We all need to act on what we're talking about. And I think as soon as we start to see more and more successes, there's greater trust and this ecosystem will just flow.
Great, thanks, Hayley. Mudit, you have an important role to play with your new role as well. What are the things that resonate or important for us to make it successful and deliver outcomes?
I'm always action oriented. So the line I would leave here with is that we are big rivals on the cricket pitch, but we'll be teammates in innovation. So let our players, our entrepreneurs start off in Australia, get your people. We have a lot of landing pads get them started off here. Hopefully we'll see some joint businesses. I heard from Hayley her plans for India. I hope she's connected to Invest India, whose job is to assist people like her in starting off in India. So we'll be rivals again very soon on the cricket field, but hoping to be partners on this pitch.
I think, yeah, I think it'll be great to see, I've seen that. I think, again, challenges bring opportunities, and I've seen Dave Warner really active on the digital space. And I think, yeah, even on the pitch together, Rohit Sharma, Dave Warner combination would be, deadly. So that's something similar we'll be looking forward to in the startup ecosystem as well. James, I'm not sure how much of a cricket tragic you are, but anyway,
well, I'm originally British, so I feel like I'm on very dangerous territory commenting on either Indian or Australian cricket potential. But I'm very happy to go to the 2020 matches. No, I think the key for me will be case studies and sharing of success to really bring examples of where the collaboration is working and where it is getting outcomes for startups and outcomes for the community. So the more of those stories that we can share, the more we can help people understand what's possible. And I think then naturally the energy of both countries' entrepreneurial communities will come to bear. But at the moment, I think we're still a little early in that process, and things like this and Zoom calls like this are so important to help people understand what's possible. And then I think as we can start to slot the scaffolding around that of this is how you get started, this is who you go to call, and once it moves from something that someone else has done to something that someone that you actually know has done, then I think it becomes extreme possible. And I think the scale of the collaboration will just take off. So the more we can do of that, the better.
Great, thanks, James. Now, I definitely want to reinforce those virtual hackathons that we are going to kickstart. Definitely during the hackathon as well, we will definitely focus on making sure that those startup ideas or ideas aligned to those problem statements are nurtured, groomed, and even supported by both the ecosystem mentors and advisors. So I'm definitely looking forward to you guys also to support us on that. But also want to do a plug-in about the market access program that we've at InQ, but also with our partners, with Australia and our partners India. We have initiated both sides from Australia to India for India market access, and also India to Australia for Australia market access that we have done. Obviously, with our physical challenges, we probably are limited, but what I would love to, again, seek all of you individually as well, your support in curating some targeted workshops or one-on-one mentoring sessions as well as part of the market access program, which I would love to facilitate under the bridge, broader bridge theme, and where, we can have one-on-one opportunities for various ecosystems, startups to actually leverage mentors and advisors and influencers both sides to really nurture and give them the right kind of support on a one-on-one basis as well. So I know this is probably thinking big, but again, even if we can make some starts there and achieve, my target, even if in the next 6 to 12 months, we have, a success story of about 10 to 15 startups both ways have been nurtured, supported, and they've been able to go get market access and get launched through, JV or whatever collaboration. That'll be a great success story, and we definitely should actively work towards that. So thank you again for all your support, and I'll definitely reach out to you all, and again, nurture and support the ecosystem either way, and definitely look forward to working closely with you. And again, call out to all the startup ecosystem partners and founders and all the entrepreneurs we'll continue the series with the investor session lined up in a few weeks time from now, and also the founder level connects, and then emerging tech series with blockchain, cybersecurity, AI, ML, AR, VR being some of those emerging techs where we will be looking at collaboration. And I look forward to working closely with you. Again, thank you for giving your time to be part of this journey. We'll have this on our YouTube channel, and will be posted for you to leverage. And I'm sure there are a lot of insights for all to take away. Thank you again, and namaskar, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you. Thanks all. Thank you to all the panelists again. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Look forward. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.